What's up, my good peoples? Welcome to the Be Transformed podcast, where we're talking about ideas that stimulate wholesome thinking into identity, purpose, vision, and action. I am James Anderson, and today we're listening to a message from our BT community group. This is a group that meets online twice a month. All these talks can be found on our website at teambtransformed.com, and you go into the menu section and you look up community group. So without further ado, let's get into it. So we've been, over the last little bit, we've been looking at kind of coming here and there with the story of Israel coming out of Egypt and then at least, journeying towards the promised land. And, we've been looking at the fact that Egypt had a certain kind of mentality that had a certain kind of perspective that created a certain kind of life that became their culture, right? And the people who came out of Egypt were born into that culture, that lifestyle, the things that were normal, that were perceived as normal. And God's vision and mission was to get Israel from bondage and slavery into the promised land, which was a land of a totally different lifestyle and a totally different reality. The challenge is that Israel was going to have to change the way they were thinking to actually be able to enter into the thing that God was calling them to. They needed to change how they interpreted circumstances and situations. Right, because every time they ran into a problem, they went into like this doomsday, all hope is lost. God brought us out here to kill us. Right? They needed to change the way they were thinking. They needed to, change the way they viewed themselves. That was a huge piece. They needed to change their self-concept, right? They needed to change and move beyond like low self-concept and perceived limitations. They also needed to create a different way of viewing God, right? They needed a more accurate picture of who God was. When Moses was up on the mountain for 40 days, they wanted Aaron to make him a God that they could see, right? That was that was going back to what was familiar. It wasn't. They kind of followed after the Egyptians with idols and whatnot. They needed a different picture of who God was. And so, we've been looking a lot at this journey because it's so relatable to us. We've been talking about, creating momentum in life and how, in this season, God is calling us into new territory that, challenges some of our paradigm. It challenges some of our belief systems. And, he's calling us into new things that require us to create momentum in areas of life where we don't have momentum. And it's interesting just how relatable the story of Israel coming out of Egypt and trying to make it to the promised land, how relatable that story is. And there's a reason for that, right? The promised land is not a metaphor for heaven, right? Like, we're trying to enter into this new land of abundance and this is, up in the sky once you die. The promised land is not a metaphor for heaven. It's a picture of the kingdom lifestyle on earth. This is why it's so relatable. This is why we can pull so many things out of it. The principles that are in, this whole, story, this history of Israel is, it gives us insights into our own lives. It gives us insight into the seasons that we are in and the places that we are going. The more insight we have into what is going on, the better we understand what's happening and the better decisions we can make and the better actions we can take. without understanding, without insight, right? It's like life becomes really confusing. But it's like these stories help shed light and relatability, and then we can see how we can better apply these principles. So we read last week in Isaiah 45, 12 through 13, and also verse 18. And it says, I have made the earth and created man on it. My hand stretched out the heavens, and all their host I have commanded. I have raised him up, talking about man, in righteousness, and I will direct all his ways. He shall build my city and let my exiles go free, not for price nor reward, says the Lord. And in verse 18 it says, for thus says the Lord, who created the heavens, who is God, who formed the earth and made it, who has established it, who did not create it in vain, who formed it to be inhabited. I am the Lord, and there is no other. Verse 18 is just such a powerful verse that it speaks to God's intent with earth, right? That it wasn't a mistake. The mission isn't just to get to heaven. The mission is still to bring heaven to earth. And the promised land just has just crazy applicable principles for this life. And so today we're still in it. We're still going to be looking at it. And so, so we've been looking at Israel coming out of Egypt, going to the promised land. A couple weeks ago, we were talking about creating momentum in life, right? How, creating momentum is a bit of a process where, creating momentum is like a big train, this big, heavy, long train. And if you want to get that thing moving, it takes a considerable amount of effort and strength and concentration to just start to get it to move. And when you're trying to create momentum, the smallest obstacle will bring all your progress to a screeching halt. And it's important to understand, because when we're stepping into new things and when we're trying to change the way we think, right? When we're trying to go from one kind of perspective to a new perspective, one way of handling, it's like a situation like this happens. Our default is to freak out or go hopeless or to maybe even a deer in the headlights, right? Like just don't even move. Don't make a decision. Just kind of, do nothing. If we're wanting to go from that kind of default to a more functional default, there's a process of making that shift, because something that's a habit is automatic, and it takes time to work through the automatic and grow our awareness to catch all these different things that happen without us having to think. We've been so conditioned to behave a certain way or to react in a certain way when a certain situation happens that we have to grow in awareness to be able to then change the way we think. And that's all part of creating momentum, is that it's a process, and it's okay that it's a process. But sometimes we can get so stuck in the weeds where it's like you can forget where you're going. And that was the big thing with Israel, is that Israel would constantly forget where they were going, right? God was bringing them out of Egypt, out of a land of bondage, but that bondage was completely familiar. People had grown up in there, and their parents had grown up there, and their parents had grown up in there. It was totally normal, that type of lifestyle. And so God was taking them out of this place of familiarity into something completely different. The challenge they had, though, is they constantly forgot where they were going. Right? So, in Proverbs 4:25 through 27, it says, look straight ahead and fix your eyes on what lies before you. Mark out a straight path for your feet. Stay on the safe path. Don't get sidetracked. Keep your feet from following evil. So it says, look straight ahead and fix your eyes on what lies before you. Mark out a straight path for your feet, right? Talking about Okay, we're defining where God is calling us into, and then we're making plans on, okay, if these are kind of the main ideas that you've been marinating on, now we're working on a plan so that we can actually take steps of action to actually create and step into the thing that God's calling us into. Well, when we're changing the way we think, when we're taking new actions, and we're going out of our comfort zone, you know, there's times where it's like, okay, man, we're focused on vision. But then it's like, there's other times where we're like, there's distractions on the right and the left, right? Fears and doubts. And Israel would get really stuck in these fears and doubts. You know, they were going to the promised land, but every time they ran into an obstacle, they had this default perspective that said, as soon as something goes wrong, it's proof that God brought us out here to kill us. And so they would get real distracted. And when you get really distracted, you tend to want to go backwards. And so we looked at a couple paragraphs in the book As a Man Thinketh, from James Allen. There's 2 paragraphs that we're looking at. And it goes like this. It says, having conceived of his purpose, a man or woman should mentally mark out a straight pathway to its achievement, looking neither to the right nor to the left. Doubts and fears should be rigorously excluded. They are disintegrating elements which break up the straight line of effort, rendering it crooked, ineffectual, and useless. Thoughts of doubt and fear never accomplished anything and never can. They always lead to failure. Purpose, energy, power to do, and all strong thoughts cease when doubt and fear creep in. Right? So this is talking about, okay, we've got some vision. We've got some purpose. There's something that we're going to work on achieving. All right, so we're going to create this plan. But while we're doing that, we have to become really aware of these doubts and these fears, because they're disintegrating elements. And effectively, they blind you. They can blind you from where you were going, and you can completely forget why you were trying to move forward. You can lose perspective where it seems like, okay, well, I'm taking all these actions, but I'm not really getting anywhere. So, I mean, we might as well just go back to where we were, right? It's like that's what fear and doubt does, is it tries to convince you to make a conclusion that the pathway you're taking isn't worth it. And eventually with Israel, right, the first group got to the Jordan. God was like, hey, you know, let's take a leader from each tribe, send them into the promised land, have them check out the land and come back and report. Well, they came back and they're like, listen, man, the land truly is legit, right? We have some vision. The land is, in fact, good. However, the obstacle, the barrier to entry is too big. The people scared them, and then they doubted that they could actually make it happen. And so these fears and doubts, these are things that we got to check whilst we are on the path of purpose, right? When you're stepping into something new, when you're trying to create change, the fear and doubt is going to try to keep you where you already are. And instead of taking the necessarily disciplined and consistent actions to create the very thing you want to create, right? So it says, the will to do springs from the knowledge that we can do. Doubt and fear are the great enemies to knowledge. And he who encourages them, who does not slay them, thwarts himself at every step. Israel thwarted themselves at every step, to the fact where they got themselves disqualified from the very thing that God was calling them into. It's interesting because, you know, we talked about how Israel, when they first came out of Egypt, God said, hey, there's a pathway we could take that would get us to the promised land faster. The problem is it goes through the land of the Philistines, and if we go that way, they're most likely going to end up at war. And if they end up at war, their mentality's not right. They're going to quit and go back to Egypt. Right? The fear of it all would be too big. The victory wasn't going to be a problem, but they didn't have a mentality. They didn't have a mentality or a belief system that was going to let them take the courageous, step of faith to fight the enemy, even though they would have had a victory. But what's interesting about this is it doesn't seem like it was an option to go through the land of the Philistines and for God to guarantee that there wasn't going to be war. That didn't seem like an option, right? He's like, we can't go there because they're going to go they'd end up at war. It didn't seem like it was an option for God to just prevent the war altogether. And then they get to the promised land. And to be able to possess the land, they had to dispossess the people. It also didn't seem like it was an option for God to just dispossess the people, which is interesting. Because, could he have? I mean, God came up with all kinds of creative ways to kill a bunch of Israel when they, wandered off the path. There was snakes one time. There's a destroyer angel. I mean, there was all kinds of creative ways that God dealt with Israel. Couldn't he have done that with the inhabitants of the land? And I was listening to this program, and there was this very interesting idea. And it went like this. It said, God cannot do for you what he can only do through you. God cannot do for you what he can only do through you. I think this is a very interesting idea. When I think about what God can do for you, when you're given things, that's wonderful. But it doesn't necessarily create a lot of development. And if everything is done for you, there's no strength developed, there's no skill, there's no development of any kind. If everything is always done for you, you're never learning how to do anything. It's not that God doesn't do things for us. But it's interesting because he's this idea, right? God can't do for you what he can only do through you. The through you piece is what creates growth, is what creates development. It's where we have to take steps of faith. It's where we have to learn how to think at a higher capacity. We have to become higher caliber people, right? The process of growth and development is what God does through you. It's the things that you have to do. It's like Israel actually wouldn't have had the mentality to possess the land if they didn't first dispossess the people. There was things they needed to grow in and gain through dispossessing the people that was going to equip them and qualify them to actually possess the land, right? And I think this is very interesting. So this is why the first group got disqualified, because they were unwilling to go through the process. They were unwilling to do the work necessary to obtain the thing that God was calling them into and had given them. It's just that there was a pathway they had to walk to actually, be able to have it. It's interesting. And so, when we think about creating momentum and we think about stepping into new territory, there are things that are beyond our comfort zone, but there's even dreams that we're dreaming about having results that we've never created before. And even stepping into things where maybe in the past we have failed or haven't done that well. But the picture God is giving us is like, no, you're not the same person anymore that you once were. Like you can't pull from that far back. Like you can't pull from that past because you're not even that same person anymore. It's like there's this development process that as we go through the uncomfortable, as we take these steps of faith, we become more. And it is vitally necessary because the whole pathway from the plagues in Egypt all the way to the Jordan this is where they were meant to be creating momentum, right? When they came up to an obstacle, right, they were meant to change their default mode where it's like, okay, they get to a big body of water, you can't drink it, everybody freaks out, but God tells Moses, hey, don't panic, grab a stick, chuck it in the water. The bitter water became sweet and everybody could drink it. So they were meant to create momentum from that obstacle to the next obstacle, right? Where there was like it was a food crisis where they wanted some different food or were running out of food, right? They were meant to go back to that new past, right? That past experience was going to be their new past. It was going to be their new starting point for future achievement. So they meant to look back at that time and say, okay, here's what happened. We didn't know what to do, but God solved that problem. I bet the God who solved that problem could also solve this problem, right? They were meant to take that last victory and apply it to their current obstacle. This is how they were meant to create momentum, and this is how they were meant to be changing the way they were thinking. They were meant to be, their identity was meant to be shifted by viewing God correctly. And it was in these different obstacles that the opportunity to view God differently existed. And so if they would have taken that past victory and applied it to the next obstacle and then solved that problem and then got to the next obstacle but their thinking was meant to be shifting all these different times, because all these times God provided a solution. That momentum was going to carry them to the Jordan, where then they were going to have to fight the enemy. So people came back and said, hey, the land's good, but the people are huge. Like, forget about it. That momentum of all these victories was meant to shift their mentality so that when they saw that the people were big, they would have been like Caleb and Joshua. We're like, guys, they're going to be our daily bread. They're going to be our food. Don't even worry about it. It's their protection is gone. That was the mentality they had the opportunity to develop along the way. They just were unable to. But it was this trusting, this reshaping of the way they were thinking, that then the opportunity, the actual dispossessing the people at the promised land, this was going to be, we're taking everything we have learned and now we're actually going to apply it in action. So this was going to be more than just, because the obstacles of the food and the water, and the food and the water and the water and the food and the food and the water, all those obstacles were meant to shift the thinking. Getting into the promised land was then they were going to have to turn that thinking into action, which was then going to create totally new results to then enter into this totally different lifestyle in the promised land, which the promised land was a land of complete and total responsibility. Right? In Egypt, there wasn't a lot of responsibility. There wasn't a lot of initiative or vision. There was just, hey, do what I tell you to do or else. And if you didn't do it, the or else would come and get you and it would put you back in line, right? In Egypt, you didn't have to have self-discipline or self-control, right? It was just ruled by fear and other people's ambition. The promised land was totally different. The promised land is operated with vision, purpose, personal initiative, and discipline. Like you had to have these things. And these were things that were going to be developed, actions and experiences that were going to be developed through dispossessing the people. If God just dispossessed the people because Israel's mind was too weak, they weren't going to have the right mentality to actually succeed in the promised land. It's interesting. And so I want to talk about we're kind of in this place, right, where we've kind of got some vision. God's calling us into some new things, and there's kind of some space in here where we're trying to create momentum, but momentum can be kind of finicky, right? Where we're taking some action and then we find ourselves stopped. And so we want to talk about how to push through that. And there was this some time ago, I heard this talk from a rabbi, and it was about the Red Sea. Now, we're gonna read a portion of this, and then we're gonna talk about this idea, this concept that this rabbi was talking about. It's possible that this story from the rabbi is drawing a little outside the lines. So, like, take the story with that understanding. But there's something there's a powerful principle that we're going to pull out of it that is 100% true and applicable. So, with that in mind, let's get into this. So, in Exodus 14:10 through 18, Israel's just coming out of Egypt, and they're kind of moving up to the Promised Land, and Pharaoh and his army have left Egypt, and they're pursuing Israel. So this is kind of where we're at. So it says, as Pharaoh approached, the Israelites looked up, and there were the Egyptians marching after them. They were terrified and cried out to the Lord. They said to Moses, was it because there were no graves in Egypt that you brought us out to the desert to die? What have you done to us by bringing us out of Egypt? Didn't we say to you, in Egypt, leave us alone, let us serve the Egyptians? It would have been better for us to serve them than to die in the desert. Moses answered the people, don't be afraid, stand firm, and see the deliverance the Lord will bring for you today. The Egyptians you see today, you will never see again. The Lord will fight for you, and you need only be still. The very next verse is, then the Lord said to Moses, why are you crying out to me? Tell the Israelites to move on. Raise your staff, stretch out your hand over the sea, and divide the waters so that the Israelites can go through the sea on dry ground. I will harden the hearts of the Egyptians so that they will go in after them. And I will gain glory through Pharaoh and his army, through his chariots and his horsemen. The Egyptians will know that I am the Lord when I gain glory from Pharaoh, his chariots, and his horsemen. So God's got this whole plan, right? Where he's hardened Pharaoh's heart so that he can destroy him in this situation right here. Israel does not get that at all. They miss that message, and they are freaking out. They're like, just let us go back. Moses is like, no, guys, just stand still, watch the deliverance of the Lord. God's like, bro, why are you calling out to me, man? Go freaking move forward and go part the sea. So there's a lot of chaos going on right here. Okay, so here's where we're going to tap into this story from this rabbi. Now, again, we might be drawing outside the lines a little bit, so keep the story in that kind of perspective. But let's think on it. The Lord said to Moses, why are you crying out to me? Tell the Israelites to move forward. So imagine with me, if you will. So we got Pharaoh and his army behind us, and we got the Red Sea. So Israel's stopped at a big halt because there's obviously this big obstacle of a body of water. They don't have any boats. And God says to move forward. So picture this, right? So here's Moses and all Israel, right? big old group of people. And they come up to the border at the very edge of the water. And God says, move forward, right? The idea is that the water is going to part. And so Moses, lifts up his foot, moves it forward. And as he goes to step his foot down, boom, his foot goes in the water. So he takes that step forward. God says, okay, take the next step. Moses is like, he's kind of looking around. He's kind of making a face. He's like, he's kind of considering the command, because he's like, the water's not parting, but he's like, all right, whatever. So he makes his face, he takes the next step. Bam. The water's up to his shins. God says, take the next step, move forward. And Moses is like, but bro, the water's not actually parting, all right? Like, this isn't dry land. God's like, no, I know, I'm going to part the water. Just take the next step. So he takes the next step, and he's knee deep. He's like, bro. And God says, hey, keep moving forward. Moses is like, bro, the water is not parted. He's like, I'm going to part the water. Just take the next step. So he takes the next step. And, he's waist deep, right? And then he's chest deep. Then he's neck deep. And then God starts to part the water. Now, again, we're drawing a little outside the lines, but just consider this. Sometimes God calls us to take steps of faith while the situation and circumstances of life don't seem to be changing. Sometimes, while we're seeking to create momentum, while we're moving into the thing that God is calling us into, sometimes we're taking these steps of faith, but it doesn't seem like anything is changing, right? In this story, right? Moses takes a step and his foot goes in the water. God's like, okay, move forward again. He's like, okay, all right. He takes another step. He's deeper in water. God's like, take another step. Moses is like, but bro, it's not parting. God's like, don't worry, I'm going to part it. And you take another step, but the situations of life don't seem to be conforming to what God is saying. It would be easier. It would be the easiest if the circumstances changed first and then you took the step, right? So if the water parted first and then he took the step, that would have been the easiest. The second easiest would have been if he would have taken that step, right? He lifts up that foot, the foot moves forward, and as it goes down, the water moves from underneath his foot, and that step was on dry ground, right? You take a leap of faith that's out of your comfort zone. You move forward, and when the situations and circumstances change immediately, it makes it easier to take the next step. Woo. But sometimes we take a step and nothing changes. Nothing seems, anyways, to be changing. And then, we've got this plan, right? We've got this vision. It says, mark out what's it say? I lost it. Where is it? Yeah, mark out a straight path. Oh, right there. Yeah, look straight ahead. Fix your eyes on what lies before you. Mark out a straight path for your feet. So we marked out a straight path, man. We've got these different ideas that we've been marinating in God, and we're taking actions, and yet things don't, seem to be changing. And it's like, okay, you're recognizing that, there's a little bit of fear and doubt. There's like, okay, I'm taking action. I'm not seeing anything. All right. This is looking, a little bit different than I had imagined in my dreams. And he's like, okay, boy, now we got to take the next step. I'm like, all right, we take that next step. Okay, this is still taking a long time. This I'm still not kind of seeing the results. The circumstances don't seem to be changing, and you got to take you got to take the next step. God can't do for you what he can only do through you. There's something super powerful to be had in this process of taking steps of faith, even while the circumstances don't seem to be changing, right? They don't seem to be changing. But now sometimes this is because we have the wrong estimation of time. And sometimes it's because we have the wrong estimation of effort, right? Like sometimes we'll plant 3 seeds, but we're hoping for 100 plants. So, we said we got to put some in. So we put some in, plant a couple seeds. God's going to blow it up. I'm going to get 10, 20, 100, 10 million fold from these plants. And we plant 3 seeds and we're hoping for 100 plants. All right. So we got minimum effort, hoping for maximum reward. Right. That's not the right perspective. But then sometimes we also have, we planted our 3 seeds. We're hoping for 100 plants, but like, how come my seeds aren't germinating? How come they don't look like big mature plants? And we expect the harvest way sooner than it really comes. There's a lot of growth and development and maturing that happens when God is doing things through us, when he's calling us into things and we're moving into them. There's a lot of growth and maturity that is wildly necessary. In James 1, 2 through 4, it says, "Consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. Let perseverance finish its work, so that you may be mature, complete, and lacking no good thing," another version says. You're never going to grow in perseverance if God's doing everything for you. It's not that God doesn't do things for us. It's just that I'm telling you in this season, and I'm telling this season that we are in right now, right, individually and corporately, that there are things that we are doing in our own individual lives. This season is connected to many seasons after it. And what we do and what we build in this season is going to create the pathway for the future, right? It's necessarily vital that we take on the giants instead of getting disqualified. We're not going to get disqualified, but it's necessary that we take these steps of faith and understand what's going on, right? So we can make better decisions and take high quality actions. Now, it's interesting because the way this reads is it says, let perseverance finish its work, so that you may be mature, complete, and lack no good thing. Let perseverance finish its work. That almost sounds like that's a passive activity, right? I could just sit back in my chair and I'm just gonna let perseverance do its work, man. It's like I'm baking in the oven, and I'm gonna come out mature, complete, lacking no good thing. Easy. Perseverance is not a passive activity at all. But perseverance, you're only going to have this when you're actually moving forward, when you're actually trying to create something. Perseverance is what is necessary to grow in maturity, right? So it's through action that we're actually learning and growing, right? So maybe we plant these 3 seeds and we're expecting friggin' 100 plants, and eventually these 3 plants sprout up And we're like, hey, where the heck is the other 100? And God's like, well, and then you have this conversation, right? The action you've taken has now created an opportunity for growth. And so we're like, God, hey man, where's the other, if I was good at math, the other 97 plants? And he's like, well, how many did you plant? I planted 3. He's like, well, why'd you expect you were going to get 100 for planting 3? This is a learning moment, right? Where we can mature in our perspective, right? Or where we think the harvest is supposed to come sooner than it is. And we're like, well, hey, where is it? I'm looking at the situation and circumstances. They're not changing. Therefore, I'm making conclusions that obviously you're not with me, or that I went in the wrong direction, or whatever. He's like, bro, how long does it take for a seed to germinate and go all the way to maturity, right? The actions we take might be planting seeds, but it takes time for it to grow. And it's like by taking action, by going through these experiences, by having these conversations, we're growing in a more mature perspective, right? Where we're moving on from some of these ideas that maybe we've been taught that haven't been quite accurate. This is what happens when God does the work through us, like when we're partnering, when we're co-laboring, we are growing in maturity. We have to grow in maturity because we have to build the things God's calling us to create the pathway for the future. So, perseverance, what is it? It's interesting. So perseverance is persistence in doing something despite difficulty or delay in achieving success. So that means that we have to continue to take steps of action and discipline with consistency whilst we are completely aware that this junk is getting heavy. There are fears and there are doubts. And I thought this was going to be way faster than it is. When you have all that and you're aware of it all, you keep going. That's perseverance. So perseverance says persistence in doing something despite difficulty. Well, persistence is firm or obstinate continuance in a course of action. Firm is like immovable. Like I picked this direction and I'm going to make it to the end destination. Obstinate means stubbornly refusing to change one's chosen course of action despite attempts to persuade one to do so. Whew. That means perseverance is you keep going even when people and situations and bad perspectives are like, hey, why don't you quit? Why don't you stop? Bro, that's stupid. Like, yeah, God was supposed to do all these things for you and he has it, man. Why don't you just give up? And you're like, listen, I hear what you're saying, but I'm on the freaking path of purpose and I'm going to keep moving forward. That is a mature perspective. That is where strength is developed. Strength is not developed by sitting around doing nothing. Perseverance only functions inside of commitment. Perseverance helps solidify and crystallize your vision and your purpose. When we have obstacles and distractions and challenges, and we move through them, we are crystallizing our purpose and says, this is the direction we are going, and we are going to continue to go, right? That's what Israel was meant to be building on the pathway to the Jordan. Was like, we got this problem, but we overcame it. Bam, we got this another problem. I don't know what to do. Okay, but we overcame it. Okay, now we got this problem. I'm going to look back. We were able to overcome it. We're going to overcome it. It's like you're able to hold on to the vision as you continue to persevere and persist. You're able to hold on to that vision a lot with a much tighter grip. And it really like establishes, this is where we're going, this is what we're doing, this is who we're becoming. So perseverance functions inside of commitment. Because if we're constantly looking for an exit, we will not persevere. If we're like, well, if we give up on the vision, we're like, well, maybe this isn't what God has for us. The seeds aren't freaking germinating. I planted 3. I was hoping for 100. I didn't get 100. Whatever. We're making incorrect conclusions. Well, that ain't gonna get us anywhere. So commitment then is a decision to devote oneself to a specific course of action, to fully dedicate yourself to something, right? To a decision to devote oneself. To devote means to focus your time, effort, and resources almost exclusively to accomplish something, right? That's I'm all in. And I have all I have all this evidence, right, that I am. Commitment is a decision to succeed, right? It's a decision. Now, a decision is the act of making up one's mind. Ooh, I don't know. You ever had a problem making a decision? The decision is the act of making up one's mind. So saying this is where we're going to go and sticking with it. Instead of like, okay, well, like today I'm confident, tomorrow I'm not. So I'm like, well, maybe that was the wrong decision. That's not what a real decision is. It's the act of making up one's mind. It's a conclusion or resolution reached after consideration, right? So resolution, resolve. To decide firmly on a course of action, firm in purpose or intent. To come to a definite or earnest decision about. So a decision is something you make after you've considered it, right? Once we consider it, then we can commit to it, right? We're not committing blindly because commitment says, hey, I'm going to succeed. Regardless of the cost, the distance, or the obstacles, I'm going to make it to the end destination. Perseverance, then, is the vehicle that takes you to the end destination. Perseverance is all about continuing on even when all the circumstances seem to be telling you to stop. And you say, no, this is the thing that God has called me to. I'm going to take actions. It doesn't matter if the situations, the circumstances aren't changing right now because there's a time for seeds to grow. My job is to keep planting seeds, keep doing the work, and I'm telling you, that freaking sea is going to part. So when we find ourselves standing knee deep in water, keep moving forward. The sea's going to part. These steps of faith, this ability to persevere, it's causing us to become people who are going to be able to possess the land. We have to do the work to grow the muscles, the experience, and the mentality to then be able to see the opportunity and be able to handle it. Without that growth and development piece, we won't even see the opportunity, right? We'll see it after somebody else comes and takes it. This isn't about fear, none of that, but it's just like the more insight we can have into what is actually happening on our pathway of purpose, the better decisions we make, the better actions we can take, the faster we can move forward, right? To where now we're planting, we know that we still want 100 plants. So now instead of planting 3, we plant 150. And we're like, I know some of these aren't going to germinate. So I'm going to plant more than I need to be able to guarantee that I get what I want. That's a totally different way of thinking. It's a way more mature perspective, which has mature actions and thinking through the process with reality in mind. That is what God is interested in. He's interested in us growing and developing so that we can take this new territory and step into the things, man, the things that he wants us to create, the solutions he wants us to bring, man, the function that he wants us to infuse the world with. But we have to live in that function first if we're going to infuse it. And so it's in this process of him doing things through us that creates that. Bam. So, guys, that's a talk. Does anybody have any closing thoughts or remarks on anything we were talking about?
Yeah, I think for me, I've been imagining about so many things. Like when I look at Moses and the way he interacted with God when he was leading the children of Israel out of Egypt. Like, I think if I were God, I will be very angry with Moses. And I'm also trying to imagine, like, if God Himself could have done whatever Moses did, then we could. I think God could become a magician. Like, I don't know. Like the people just get in front of the Red Sea and is like, here's the way, the dry land. So, like, I think sometimes we delay God's purpose in our lives just because of fear and doubt. Because, like, whatever you're just saying, that God cannot do for me what He can do through me. Like, yeah, I'm trying to look at Moses. God could not have taken the rod and struck the water for the Red Sea to part, and maybe people can now pass. Moses had to do the work, and his work was only to put the rod on the water. So, like, it seems like we might have also delayed some other people's destinies and purpose just because we are not doing what God has to do. We are not allowing God to do what He has to do through us. So I think for me, it's really a big challenge, and yeah, fear and doubt always plays a very big role, and it makes most of us to want to remain in our comfort zone because we mostly think, what will people say? Like, you really feel like you want to do something. You feel in your heart like when you do it, it will succeed. You will make it. But somebody comes and is like, oh, no, 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 I was in that field, man. It's happy you're talking to me. You could have failed. But now, just because you have talked to me now, don't do it. And you allow the negative ideas creating fear in your life and doubt, and you choose to remain in your comfort zone and you delay God's purpose in your life. So I don't know, but if there was a way of just chasing fear away, like caning somebody, it could be very easy. And I think most of us will be far much from where we are right now. So to me, it was good learning. And yeah, I think I need to grow this perseverance thing. Yeah, I think I need to grow in that also, so that maybe sometimes I can make the right decision. So thank you for the teaching. For me, it was good learning. Thank you.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I was thinking about how, once, like James was saying, like the things they went through, they're meant to look back and be like, oh, we overcame that, now we can overcome that. And if you think about our own experiences where, it's like as you develop and as you get stronger, like you're able to handle the next thing. And so it's just like the idea of that path where, you have to accomplish some things in order to then be able to accomplish and persevere and have the strength to do the next thing. And so sometimes there's that process. And so if we don't go through that perseverance and commitment step, then we can't get to the next thing because we aren't developing those muscles. We aren't developing that strength that allows us to then handle what's next. Which was the idea of the Israelites. It's like they couldn't do the Philistines at first, so they had to go through the long journey to then conquer conquer the people in the end, but then they still had to learn from that. So, just that challenge of like, when we go through something that requires perseverance, it is doing something in us. It's developing in us what's required for what's next in the journey. And if we don't go through things that require us to grow that strength, then we can't handle what's next.
Yeah, there's this little last section. There's another paragraph in As a Man Thinketh in the Thought and Purpose. It says, a man or woman should conceive of a legitimate purpose in his heart and set out to accomplish it. He should make this purpose the centralizing point of his thoughts. It may take the form of a spiritual idea or a worldly object according to his nature at the time, but whichever it is, he should steadily focus his thought forces upon the object which he has set before him. He should make this purpose his supreme duty and should devote himself to its attainment, not allowing his thoughts to wander away to ephemeral fancies, longings, and imaginings. All right, so not allowing the thoughts to like, oh, this shiny thing over here. Oh, okay. Oh, no, what about this over here? Oh, what about, right? Like constantly just ping-ponging all over the place. Don't allow your thoughts to wander away to ephemeral fancies, longings, and imaginings. This is the royal road to self-control and true concentration of thought. Even if he fails again and again to accomplish his purpose, as he necessarily must until weakness is overcome, the strength of character gained will be the measure of his true success, and this will form a new starting point for future power and triumph. Right? Where we're able to take our new past, our last victory, and we're saying, okay, here's a roadblock, here's a barrier, here's something that's scary, here's this is out of our comfort zone. But remember, we did it. We did it back here, and let me. Right? And I'm going to apply that past experience to this current one. And it's going to help me take action. And now when I take action and I step into that uncomfortable zone, I now have a whole new place, another starting point. And now I've got multiple past victory experiences that I'm applying to, every next thing that we're doing. But it's about that. It's about being able to continue to progress. And every time we're progressing, it's like we've got these victories that are propelling us into the next thing. Guys, thanks so much for tuning in. Until next time,